Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah. Okay, go for it.
I'm Kate.
I'm Lauren. What else do we say?
What else is there? I'm Kate McAndrew. I'm co-founder and GP at Baukunst.
And I'm Lauren, CEO and co-founder of GOB.
And we just invested in you guys. But we've known you for a long time. And I think like my experience of how we came together, how GOB came together, it's such a beautiful exposition of like the way that company building can be an organic process. Or that's how it felt to me. And I feel like I was sort of watching you emerge, watching GOB emerge in this really beautiful way. And I wanted to just like talk with you about that, what that experience has been like for you. But first, what is GOB? Tell us.
GOB is the world's first completely plant-based hearing protection. And we're building an ecosystem of regenerative wellness products. So yes, we're starting with single-use regenerative earplugs, but we plan to expand way above and beyond in this new category of personal protection.
And I met you when you were running Prowl, a regenerative design studio here in San Francisco. And GOB was really birthed out of Prowl. Can you talk a little bit about what Prowl was and kind of how GOB came to be?
Yeah, so Prowl's still going hard. Bailey is now at the helm of that business.
She's amazing.
Shout out to Bailey. And the whole ethos of that business was to create the regenerative future through this idea of we begin with the end, right? So when thinking about a new product, we have to think about its end of life first before we even start conceiving of what materials it will be made out of or how someone might use it. And so that whole thinking and wrapping our heads around that thinking constantly is what I think led to the idea of GOB. It was literally, my brain was just in this headspace. I was on a trip to New York City and saw earplugs and had this moment because I was living and breathing that ethos, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and we met it at the first Baukunst Creative Technologists Conference in San Francisco at the Long Now. And one of our collective members brought you another amazing female industrial designer.
Nicole and Vicky.
Yeah, the best from Level. And we met, and I just was like so taken with you.
Likewise.
Yeah, I was just like, who is this woman?
You were wearing red lipstick.
I was always.
Yeah.
And you like blew into this happy hour, and you had this really like, what I felt was this sense of presence, which is something that I'm always looking for in founders, because I feel like you have to be so deeply rooted in yourself and in your mission to be able to withstand the like noisy weather that is starting something from scratch. And Prowl was reasonably new, like, and it was a consultancy, but I was just like, there's something about you, which by the way is like, that's how my friends are. I love that. We're all making things, and we had coffee. You guys were doing some work with Lightship. And that was really the beginning of really a friendship, like a professional friendship, personal friendship, professional collaboration, series of collaborations, where we really got to know each other. And I'm curious, that's my memory of how we came together. What's your memory of how we came together?
Well, we met at that event, which when I got invited to that, I was like, what on earth is this? And I was like, I'm a yes person. I was like, absolutely, I will be there. But I went in knowing only Nicole and Vicky. And now out of the collective, I know a large majority of the people, which is wild. But went in there and met some of the most interesting people within like 20 minutes, right? Because I was only there for the happy hour. And then when we got coffee, I went in with very like little expectations, but having read your website and kind of looked you up a bit, I was like, damn, this is a very interesting woman. And so I went into it just being really excited, and then leaving that day being like, we just planted a seed. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
And so that was 2.5, 3 years. That was 3 years.
3 years ago.
Yeah. So since then, I mean, so much has changed, but I really felt like that experience was, because the only touch point I had to Baukunst was you, but I felt like this idea of art of building and what you were creating, but also the way that you talked about business. I'll never forget the first time we met, you said, the reason why I do what I do is so I can give good money to good people to build good things. And you were like, that's what I do for a living.
Yeah.
And being a creative, I was a bit afraid of the VC world, to be honest, because I kind of thought, oh, that's for a different business category, you know, and that's something that I can't touch. And then I was immediately like proved wrong, right? Because I realized that it doesn't have to be this untouchable world.
Well, I think that's like one of the things that's so interesting is like, to me, the best founders, they are creative, right? They might not self-identify as creatives from the sense of, oh, they like hung out in the art lab a lot, you know, growing up. But there's this sense of being able to see the world and then having the ability to reconstruct it, right? And again, there's this capacity to see past where we are today. And then part of it is to be able to see the world around us, to pick it apart, to imagine that it could be put together differently. And I feel like you do this in this really literal way with like the materiality of the world. And I feel like that was something that I began to see through your eyes, right? And understanding, like, and I love, you had this really incredible, actually I interviewed you for my book, The Goddess Guide to Branding, as one of the branding experts focused on material. And one of the things that you said is like, we should not be using virgin materials for anything. Like zero virgin materials, we don't need to. And there might be some narrow cases like medical or, you know, where that's possible. But really it was, and I felt like it was such, for you, an empirical fact.
Yes.
And I was just like, okay, like what's my role to play in this? And it was a little bit of a wake up call for me. I was like, I feel like this isn't an area where I've been bullish enough, you know, about looking for what's possible. And I don't know, the solar punk future started to feel like within grasp.
Solar punk.
Yeah, and I remember you called me, or maybe you texted me, and you were like, I had an idea. And I was like, ooh, I've been waiting for this moment. And you were like, compostable earplugs. And I was just like,
I know. I was like, I surprised myself too. I was like, is this really the idea that I'm coming up with that is like the thing I'm going to build for the next however many years? And I couldn't have imagined that it was going to be that, but it's been perfect actually. Yeah.
And so the things that like I saw, and you were asking like, do you have like someone you can put me in touch with to work on this? And I was like, let me see who's like kicking around. And Michael Bred, who's now your co-founder, I invested in his first company back in, I would say 2015. It's like one of the first investments that I led. They sold that business, and then he's such a weird hustler. I love him. He's such a weirdo, and you could only partner with someone who like had a little bit of weirdo in them.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
But I knew that he was kind of like kicking around with some latent brain space, and so connected you guys to work on it. But what was interesting about that moment is you were looking for someone to really dig into this concept with, to pressure test it with. But I think you still had this idea that like, oh, they would be CEO. Like, yes. I'm just the design person.
Yes.
Right. And I was like, okay, you know, let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
And you went on that journey. And again, I was sort of watching from the sidelines. What was that chapter like?
Well, so I was bullish about building and running Prowl still. Right. And so when I had this idea, I had always in the back of my head thought that Prowl could turn into something other than an agency or in addition to an agency. And when I had this idea after a spin class that blasted Vanessa Carlton for an hour, that's literally what happened.
I'm sorry, did you need earplugs for that?
I did. It was so loud. And the spin instructor, because I was new at the studio, he like grabbed onto my bike and he was screaming the lyrics, and it was amazing.
That's a Carlton?
Yes.
Wow.
It was in Brooklyn. And after that spin class, I was like, oh my God, this is the idea. Then like came back to SF. I remember texting Bailey, dude, compostable earplugs. And she was like, what? Like, you found them or you're looking for them? And I was like, they don't exist. And then called you. I remember exactly what I was doing. I was walking down past Tartine Manufactory. I was doing laps on that sidewalk and just like sussing out, like, because I knew like you're a master of helping people build businesses. And so I was like, this is the person I need to call. And I did indeed think that I needed a CEO because my idea of what a CEO was, and mind you, I've listened to every episode of How I Built This. I've been obsessed with founder culture forever, but I just never saw myself as like being able to be that and emulate what a CEO can be, because I had this idea that CEOs are spreadsheet people and that they are you have to have a finance brain and you live and breathe that, and then you also are pretty good at business development. But what I know about myself is I'm really good at business development. That's kind of like my favorite thing to do in the world. But I also am I'm a vision builder. So I'll have this idea. I'll obsessively build this thing until it becomes like crystallized. And now knowing that's what a CEO does.
Well, I think it's so interesting because to me, like I felt this friction in my own like becoming. Like for a long time, I like became an investor before I even really had an idea of what that was. And then living in Silicon Valley, especially being a woman here, I feel like I was really in conversation with my idea or my idea of other people's idea of what a VC was. And I was really in conversation with that. I mean, I'll always be in conversation with that, but in a deep way until we started Baukunst, and I was just like, there is no space for that anymore. Like, I have to just emerge as myself.
Totally.
And when you do that, like, I think to me, the number one thing that happens is you start to magnetize the right people, right? And one of the things that happened as you emerged into yourself, into your confidence, and I think started to unlearn a little bit of the training that the podcasts give us, what CEOs are. You just started magnetizing people to this mission. I think as you put it, like, it took on a life of its own, right? And that kind of like velocity is something that is very common with people who have what it takes to build startups, because you have there's such unique animals, right? You're going from nothing to something. It's so different than like tending to something that exists. And I just saw that in you, like that incredible magnetic quality, and beautiful things came for the business out of that.
Yeah.
So there was this like 1 year arc from when you called me and you were like compostable earplugs, and I was like, to you kind of really going on this journey to transition from writing Prowl to leaning into GOB full time. What was the choice like for you to go to GOB full time?
Well, it wasn't easy, right, at first. But then it kind of just happened naturally. So the way that I saw GOB in the early days, and this is like maybe 2 years ago even, a year and a half ago, was I was like, oh, this is something that we could do on the side, and we could side hustle the hell out of this thing and have a new revenue stream for the studio. And as we built the brand, as we started to build out the story and we saw the opportunity on the B2B front, in addition to direct consumer, I was starting to realize, okay, well, this is growing like this, but so is Prowl, right? And so I was starting to realize that, one, I cannot pull myself in two directions and be growing two businesses at once. However, I have an awesome business partner on the Prowl side who wants to, and is continuing to grow that business, right? So,
and you guys had so much traction, right? We've been in the New York Times like 6 times in 1 year. I mean, you were blowing up.
yeah, we got a lot of press. Milan Design Week helped a lot with that, and I think it's because of the mission, right? And we're women, and that's very rare in industrial design, but it felt as though at first when I would consider, all right, what happens if I go full-time into GOB, it felt like I'd be killing something that it gave birth to, right? But I realized that as an entrepreneur, sometimes you have to make that call. And you have ideas for businesses like GOB that are scalable and are relevant in the moment, maybe once in your life, right? And so it just kind of happened as well, I see this is growing, and if I really want to do this justice and build it right, then I have to go all in, right?
And I think just to comment on that, like, I've seen so many people who are in that situation and they don't go. And that was one of the things I was kind of watching for. Like, some people also want to wait until they want to make sure that they're going to have a ton of money in the bank before they make that call.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the kind of maybe unfair tests that investors look for is like, are you truly all in?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you have to not work for any comp for a long time, but there is this sense of looking for that commitment. And watching you make that commitment to GOB, I was like, she's all in. Like, 2% of the people that we see who have ideas, who are in agencies, who think about starting something, actually do it. Like, because I get those calls all the time. Hey, I run this agency. We have this internal project we're thinking about spinning out. And it was actually a real privilege to like watch you in that process and to be your friend in that process, right? And to be able to be in that process with you. And I feel like I gained a lot of respect for what that mentally, emotionally, and spiritually is like. And I think the beautiful part of it is it wasn't about putting Powell down. It was about figuring out how can all of these things thrive while recognizing your own capacity and like what you needed in order to kind of go towards what was calling you, which was GOB. So that was a big thing for me from the outside and for our team to see. And the other was, I remember, and this was really the moment where I was like, all right, we gotta get in. You know, you were in LA, I was in LA, and we had brunch. And you were telling me about the insane people that you had been magnetically attracting to this business and who were just like all itching to help, right? And that's like probably the number one thing I look for in a CEO is someone who can magnetize extraordinary people to them. Because businesses aren't built by one person, they're built by an ecosystem of people. And that's not just about people that you hire. It's about the people who want to advise you, the people that want to pick up the phone for you, right? It's about that whole ecosystem. And like, I could just see this whole incredible like cloud of people coming around you. So tell me about like what created that? How did that happen for you? Like, I want to know. Because it wasn't like sales. It wasn't like, oh, here's my enterprise sales pipeline. Like, it wasn't like that, which is how a lot of people think it happens.
Yeah, no.
It doesn't.
No, I like truly just, I think this comes from like the type of family I come from, right? Like, they're just people, and they're like small town heroes. And
your dad's a firefighter.
Yeah, chief of a volunteer fire department.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's amazing.
Unpaid.
Yeah.
He's actually one of the models for GOB too. But what happened was I just have this mentality. I don't know where it comes from, but I have this mentality of, well, if I'm going to do something, I need the best people to do it, and I need the best people to represent it. And so I don't start at these like micro, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we started small? Like, I have this, maybe to my own detriment in my own life, but I have this thing in me that just goes, all right, we start at the top. And in this case, it was very big pop stars. And I just kept showing up to every meeting I could, showing up to every group that I could, telling everyone the people I was trying to access. And then within maybe we'll call it like 6 phone calls, I accessed these people, and which will be in the press launch. But it's just a matter of saying it out loud and finding those people and then getting them excited and also understanding those people's needs and wants and values so that you can help. Like, it's not just me trying to sell them something. And in fact, like if I'm doing my job and building this business, people will feel excited and privileged as if they get something. It's not like, oh, I have to pay for this thing or I have to do this thing. It feels more like less of them doing me a favor and more of them getting a huge benefit of being part of this cultural moment.
Right, because you're putting an offering out.
Right.
It's an offering.
Yeah.
And they get the privilege of taking that offering.
Right.
If they so choose.
Right, exactly.
Oh, we are.
And it's put me in, what I have learned is I don't really get starstruck, so that's good.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things about people is they understand that we're all just like humans underneath whatever kind of costume we're wearing in the public, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's people forget that sometimes. There's a performative nature to, again, back to this idea, we start over, like, something that you're talking about is really understanding that underneath, like, the costume of our profession, there's just a person there, right? And I think most people are trying to do good, right? They're trying to show up in a way and use their power for good. I believe that.
Me too.
And if you give them a hook and you say, hey, I have a really easy way for you to, like, show up in a way that feels good and feels generative, like, they want to do it.
Yeah.
They want to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that breakfast, I just remember looking across at you and being like, oh, she's fully the CEO now. Like, we've gone on this journey.
Yeah.
You know, and made hard choices. And the difference between when I met you, where I was so just like drawn to you and you clearly had something really special about you, to really understanding how personally called you feel to building this regenerative future, to then seeing you kind of bring people around this product mission and then see it snowball and see you own it and see you coming alive in it. Like, it was to me the journey of becoming the founder, becoming the CEO. It was really a privilege to get to watch that.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been wild, and still, like, I don't think that I have imposter syndrome. I have a lot of confidence in myself. This just comes from, like, leadership since childhood. Like, I was team captain of, like, every sports team and stuff. Like, of course you were, right? And so I just, like, thrive in leading, I think. But I also lean on so many mentors to also show me by example how to lead. And through mentorship and through keeping elders close, I have learned both how not to be and how to be, and I think it's prepared me for this moment. I've also worked for a lot of assholes, and I have so many examples of how not to act and how not to lead. So what's exciting is I see this as an opportunity to do it my way, right? And bring on just, like, the best people and hope that they want to, grow with us, because startups are risky and the momentum is infectious. Yeah. And so it almost feels like the team we have right now, it's just like the excitement is effervescent, and it just is continuing to, like, swirl, and we haven't even launched yet.
Yeah. So you raised $1 million. We were a big part of that.
Yeah.
But not the only part of that.
Right.
And you're raising $1 million in the context of everyone hates e-commerce. If it's not AI, they're like, get out of my face, right? Like, for a physical products company like mycelium earplugs.
Yeah.
Right? So
it's absurd.
It's like not at the top of everyone's investment thesis list. No. Which I think is great, like, to be zag when they zig or what have you. But what was that like for you? Like, what was fundraising like for you? We talked about the personal journey. What was the fundraising journey like for you?
The fundraising journey was longer than I thought, although I knew it would be hard. We pitched you a long time ago when we hadn't had the material. We didn't really have like the workings of our structure internally figured out, aka me full time. And without the material, it was like a reusable option first, and which is like not as big of an opportunity. And so what was wild about the fundraising journey is what people say about when you get traction, it just starts to go, right? Mm-hmm. And so we started out with a few small checks from some really trusted, like good friends and people who are in like product and who have seen CPG and direct-to-consumer companies thrive. For example, one of our advisors, Dane McDonald, he helped build Liquid Death into what it is now. And so just kind of surrounded ourselves with like really like 5-star humans to help us understand like what we can do better to then be able to actually go find more money. And so started out very small, and then as traction started to take hold, we just kept editing the pitch deck. Mm-hmm. But then February came, and the story of how we got this material, I've been begging our partners Innovative for this material since I think it was 2015. I saw this foam prototype at Biofabricate conference. Mm-hmm. And I was working in footwear at the time. And I was like, guys, I need this material. By the way, I went to school with the people who started this business, and we had the same mentor, same professor. So same way of thinking. I really wanted to work with them. And it was February of this year that the material became available, and we were the first people to get our hands on it. Mm-hmm. That moment changed our fundraising like dramatically, right? Because we now had a replacement that worked beautifully to replace the 40 billion single-use earplugs we make a year. And then it was more interesting to music venues. It was more interesting to motorsports. And so we started to just sell to those areas. And then as B2B momentum went up, our momentum with fundraising also continued. However, we had maybe 400K in the bank, and we were like, all right, we can do this with this amount of money.
Which is so scrappy.
Very scrappy.
Yeah.
Especially for having to build inventory, having to build product, like R&D, because we weren't sure how long R&D would take. And then I'd say like I was on my way to Los Angeles to meet with these managers of some pretty big artists who want to not only sell GOB, but also rep it. And so I was having this feeling of, yeah, sure, I want to bootstrap this thing to a degree, but bootstrap, we can do this way bigger. Mm-hmm. There was a journey in the middle of this where a pretty well-known VC who has built some pretty big direct-to-consumer brands gave us a term sheet.
Mm-hmm.
But
for like kind of your dream amount of money.
Yeah.
With the dream resume.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I felt so proud in the moment when we got the term sheet, and then started digging into the terms. They looked like garbage. But I was going through this mental turmoil of like, oh, but I got the term sheet. I did the thing. I should just sign. And then I started reading more and deliberating more with my co-founders and with our lawyer, and realized that 1, it's a bad deal. Mm-hmm. 2, the partners were being very kind of like, they told me ESG was bullshit, which off the bat I was like, maybe I can deal with that, but like, we'll see. 3, they had worries about me living in Oakland. And so there were all these like personal weird things that they were saying to me. And then I just felt like I was being groomed. Mm-hmm. And so I said no, and they continued to not take no for an answer. So that experience happened this winter, and it did make me feel nervous to take on VC money at all.
And I remember you talking to me about that. And actually, my perception of you saying no, that deepened my resolve, right? Because I think that you have really high standards for yourself, for those around you, ethically, from a taste perspective. And like, one of the things I think is really true about you is like, if you're not all in, like, you're out.
Yes.
And very few people have the guts to stand up to their own values, those values, when they're being faced with the option to have, millions of dollars. And so, like, seriously, it is very few people can say no to that term sheet, and you did, and it was an extraordinary move.
Yeah, and some of the brands that I look up to the most were funded by these people. And so they took that deal. I know that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I lose respect for them. It's just like, I'm really lucky to have people to lean on to push me in the right direction and tell me when something's not right. So that whole experience was very eye-opening, and it did scare me for a little bit, but then I had you all to lean on. And so not only like did you answer my phone calls about it, but also help me like get data from other people about it. By the way, if you're going to take money from a VC, look at the partners' Twitter feeds.
Oh my God, totally.
Because if you see what they're putting personally out into the world, that's what you're dealing with, right? And so that was actually the moment where Michael and I were like, oh, hell no. So, yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I think that one of the sadnesses that I have is seeing kind of companies fall apart 7-8 years in, because the board and the founders not only are misaligned from like a what should happen perspective, but there's like a moral misalignment. I don't know, no shit posting. I'm just not here for it.
Amen. Yeah, exactly.
And I think I do think that like we build these companies oftentimes in our image, right? Like putting good money behind good people, like that is a huge part of why I feel like I'm in this, what I'm doing in this life, right? And I think what does good money mean? It's like, it's money that's there to like empower the best in people to come out, right? And I think if we do that, we have this opportunity to reshape how companies are built, to reshape what capitalism looks like, right? Like, I think the idea that like a business's job is to accrue as much money as possible is like the saddest definition of a business ever. Like, I really think about businesses as businesses are excuses for people to come together around a shared mission that they can enact in the world. And if you think about businesses that way in the context of capitalism, there's so much that you can do to create ththese new universes, right? New worlds. So
absolutely,
yeah, it's a hopeful definition, but I mean, I've seen it come to life with people that we funded, and it's very powerful.
Yeah, outrage and optimism.
Yes. Outrage and optimism. I love that. So one of our philosophies at Baukunst is really about ecosystem over ecosystem. And I feel like GOB is an incredible example of how that plays out.
We're the case study.
Yeah, you guys are like the case study. So like, what does ecosystem versus ecosystem mean to you? How does that show up in the context of GOB?
Well, it's funny because the first time I saw you guys present that, which was the first collective conference we went to, it hit so hard. I was like, yes, this is exactly how I think. And, well, if we go back, my first interaction with you was through the ecosystem, right? We met through members of your collective who were friends of mine through Women in Design. And so how we met was through that, right? And there's this idea with business building that competition, it's something that you have to protect yourself from others. You have to like keep the door shut, keep a little bit of mysticism. And there's this feeling of like, I need to climb my way to the top. Therefore, this is how I survive, right? And I believe that is the ecosystem.
Very scarcity mentality.
Scarcity mentality. fear-based decision making, and usually just more rigid and old school rules around networking, right?
Networking.
And
Yeah.
I've been told before, like, ooh, you're a networker because you have such a... I'm like, don't call me that. I'm a people person. Shut up. But I guess the ecosystem to me is letting go of that idea of competition, because also I don't really believe in competition that much. Like, yes, I know we have to compete in the marketplace, yada yada, but the way I see it is, if you're unique enough and you have your own, you're comfortable in your own skin, that, when I say comfortable in your own skin, I mean that as like a company, but also as a person. So you have to be confident enough to move through the world in a way where you're not afraid that someone else is going to come and take whatever is meaningful to you away, right? And so when you let go of that, the world opens up. And trusting in people, and trusting that people are going to do a great job, trusting that people are going to help you out if you return the favor. It's just this like feedback loop, right? Which is also how things work in nature, right? That's how our world works. That's how like organisms help each other out and they feed each other, and actually mycelial networks are totally like that. But when you let go of this feeling of someone owes me something if I give them something, and you just trust that reciprocation will come, that's when the walls break down and your network expands tremendously, right?
Right. It's the difference between keeping the tally of who owes whom what, and just giving help when you can't, right?
Totally.
And having that kind of abundant, the idea of like, it's all bubbling over. I have more than enough, right? And when you approach the world that way, a lot comes back to you.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the things that was really, you talked about mycelium, like you joined an event we did with the collective, and then very soon after we collaborated on an art exhibition together around biomaterials and climate technology. And then just naturally, it was like, well, of course you guys should be in the collective. Join the collective. And then we worked on this study group together all around mycelium. And it was our first study group, and study groups are, for people who don't know, they're short like sprints around collaborative learning. So people from the collective can kind of sign up to go on this journey to learn about something. So it was like a 6-week deep dive into mycelium. And it was just like fascinating to think back to all of the breadcrumbs that created the like aha for me, right? And there was the piece about you, there was the piece about connecting you with others in our ecosystem who became your co-founders. There was watching you kind of embody the CEO in time. There was getting to actually work with you to see how you work. And then there was, which was a huge piece, like getting to actually collaborate with you. I was like, oh yeah, like she's trustworthy, she works hard, she has high taste, like, and it's really hard to know that if you don't collaborate with people.
Totally.
So, I mean, it's not everyone gets to do this, but this is the benefit of the collective, right? You actually get to spend time with people.
True.
And understand like how they operate, both individually and, you know, in a work context. So, but then learning about mycelium together and really like thinking about that from a material perspective, from a metaphorical perspective, like for me, there was so many things that kind of primed the opportunity for the investment to happen, which now that I look back, it doesn't feel like the investment was not the beginning, right?
No.
Like that was not the beginning. The investment was just, was like, oh, now it's official. It's like becoming Facebook official or something.
That is
like
absolutely how
it went from just like, it was like
Yeah.
this really natural, organic process.
Yeah.
And I think you're now the second founder that we've invested in, who's a collective member, who then started a company that we invested in, which was,
So
that
awesome.
was a dream.
Yeah.
When we put up this ecosystem, that's like, we put this out there. It's like, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to manifest. And it's actually happening. It's like an incredible feeling.
You're living it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible feeling. And it's not at all how people say it's going to work,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, because an idea of a collective has been done many times and not actually nourished like a community.
Right.
Right. That Slack channel, so active, right? Like at least every day someone puts something on the Slack for the collective, right? And during the study group, it was just genuine curiosity, and it was hilarious to us because we received this giant piece of mycelium foam the day that the study group kicked off.
Yeah.
And I also like am a fungi freak, right? And I just love mycology, and there's so much to learn. But I remember on the first call, I had this giant piece of mycelium I showed everybody as like show and tell, which is actually the material we use for our product now. And the serendipity in that is like too good to be true. Right?
I think this is also one of the things that's really beautiful about being in the Bay Area, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like so much of the internet startup culture is about like, how do I perfect my pitch? How do I like have the most perfect polished thing and like the right intro? And if you actually are living in community together, there are so many opportunities to make yourself known to other folks who are going to help you, not just from an investment perspective, but yes, from an investment perspective, because you're like kicking around, you know, kind of the same events, the same things, like going to dinners together. And I do think that that is the way that people who are like meant to work together can find each other in a way that doesn't feel forced. And I think when you're in this position of like a transactional nature of like, I give best pitch, you give check, right? That transaction, while there is a financial transaction that's happening, like it doesn't feel good if it doesn't feel like there's genuine partnership. And I think one of the things that is really sad about the way that a lot of investing happens today is like you get a pitch on Monday and people want a term sheet by Friday, and it's like, I don't know you, and I'm supposed to give you $1 million and not ask that many questions. There's something about that just like literally doesn't feel good in my body. Which doesn't mean that we don't get pitches, due diligence quickly, make investments. Like, of course we do that. But when we can have this more organic emerging, this deeper knowing, it makes it easier to make big investments in companies that don't have revenue and don't have a product, right? Because you do have this deeper sense of the philosophical thrust behind the idea, the morals and ethics and drive of that person. And I think some people think that second-time founders get funded more easily because they have the win under their belt. But I honestly think more often it's because more investors have had a chance to know them. You know? So I do think this is like, it's not that great companies can't be started anywhere. They can and they are, but I do think that it is a big value to being in the Bay Area, is getting to be in community, in connection, in community collaboration with people who can give you $1 million check.
And people in the Bay Area who believe in like an optimistic future. That's what this city is. It's an incubator for the future. And I wouldn't want to start this company anywhere else. And also, just back to your point on getting to know people before investing in them, pitching to Baukunst and building our relationship was night and day from pitching to other VCs who, on a scale, like I pitched to people who I could tell did not want to even listen to me, but they just took the call because someone introduced us, right? But then on the other, I had met a lot of great people also who are like, come back to me later, right? But pitching to you all was more of like it felt more like, hey, I know you believe in what we're doing, and watch us go build it, and then like almost like leaning on you guys for advice. And then once you're already kind of collaborating, it makes it easier, right? Because you can actually see what's happening. There's not this like smoke and mirrors, it's just the pitch deck. And which honestly, like you can put anything in a pitch deck, right? And so there's this trust that's built, and that's why it felt so natural. That's why I just called you and was like, Kate, it's time. We have traction.
And I was like,
if you want to reconsider, please.
Well, and I remember going, because we passed originally, right? And we were like, and it wasn't like, no, not ever. It was like, no, and here are the things, here are the whys. Like, here's where we don't feel it. And when you called me again, you were like, it's time. And I was like, it's time. And I remember going to my partner meeting, and I was just like, I like came to the table, and I was like, I had my notes, and I was like, we are investing in them. And everyone was just like, looking at you. They're like, okay, Kate. Because it was like, I was now, you had become the unstoppable train. And it was like, there's no way I'm not getting on this train. Like, literally, my feeling was, I am not missing this train. Like, if this train leaves the station and I'm not on it, like, something has gone horribly wrong in my life. And I was like, I'm getting on this train, which then that energy gets my partners on that train. And now everyone's on that train.
Right.
And that's what momentum is.
Yeah.
Right. And quite literally. And some people call it FOMO. That's like a sort of very depressing way to think about it. Like, that's sort of taking the worst of human nature and architecting it around like fear.
Yeah.
And for me, it was sort of like, this opportunity is so juicy. It's so juicy, and they're going to do it, and I want to be part of it. I want to help. Right. I'm getting on that train.
Yeah.
So now we're on the train. Right. And we got to keep collaborating and keep working together. And I think one other thing I wanted to bring up, so we were talking about being in community with people who have the opportunity to invest, and how we get the chance to know you and to see who you are, not just what you're doing, and that can give us confidence in putting a lot of money into something that doesn't have revenue, doesn't have a product yet. The other piece of that people rarely talk about is like, you're selling a big chunk of your business that you're going to be working on day in and day out. Like, that's a bi-directional trust.
Yes.
And I feel like that's something that we need to talk about more. Like, there's a responsibility on the investor side, and there's a leap of faith that happens on the company side to take that money in exchange for a big piece of your business. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about that?
Yeah. And again, this was my first time raising money, so I had to do a lot of research and talk to a lot of people. And the thesis I came up with was, only give people a chunk of your business if you believe that they'll be on the journey with you the whole time, right? Because I don't want anyone to just invest and then like kind of sit on the bench and wait for their payout. Like, sure, that could be nice for some people who want people hands off, but that's not really, we're a relationship team, right? Like, I wanted someone who was going to actually be there for us and be there for me in like the dark times and the good times, because the dark times will happen, right? And so it was a learning lesson of how much am I willing to give away, but also knowing that I wanted to retain like my key ownership and my team's ownership, right? So it was just a lot of learning, a lot of talking to people, and then ensuring, after pitching to a bunch of people and having all these incredible angels that joined us, who are all people from our community, talk about like ecosystem, some of them interest from you guys also, that it made me realize like that you can say no to people if you don't want to give them a chunk of your business. And the way that someone put it to me is my coach, Arjun. He said, think about it this way. Do you, in the event that your business does exactly what you envision, do you want to make these people richer?
Totally.
And that, for me, was the unlock.
Yeah.
I saw everything clearly. I was like, it really is as simple as that. It really is as simple as that.
Yeah.
And if I don't trust these people, no. And if I have like a gut feeling like, I just like, you don't really see what I'm seeing, and like, yeah, sure, you want to like profit off me, whatever, but like, if I don't want to see you, like, if you are already well off, or you're already whatever, or maybe you're not even yet, but like, if I don't want to give you a piece of my pie and like actually contribute to your financial freedom in the future, then let's not sign the papers.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel the same way about our investors, right? Like, I think people rarely talk about venture capitalist investors, and when you run your own fund, like, you have to go and raise the money, right?
So many people don't know that, by the way.
Yeah, like, it's not like, if you like work at Sequoia, like, it's totally abstracted from who the investors are, right? But like, so many people in venture are basically working for like the Saudi government. Like, they're making money for the Saudi government, right? Like, that's
wild.
Really, like, they're making money for big oil. that's where a lot, and sure, some of it's like pension plans, true, right? But a lot of the big funds, like their money comes from people in places that I would not be, that I would not feel good about making money for. And that's something that we had to really think about when we raised our fund, right? And I think that's something that founders should ask their investors. Like, who are your investors? Because ultimately, like, when you make money for our fund, we're making money for our investors. And all of that is about the multiplicity of impact that a given startup exit can have. And it really has a reverberating nature in this world.
Totally.
And like, you don't always have the privilege of taking like the perfect money or what have you, but like it can be pretty good, right? Like, there's a lot of good people out there, there's a lot of good institutions out there. And I think for me, like, that's one of the reasons that I can feel good about waking up in the morning and doing this work. And I also feel a sense of responsibility. Like, I feel a deep sense of responsibility to give the best returns to our investors. And I feel a deep sense of responsibility to invest in good people, like up and down the stack. And I feel like I sleep well at night based on our LP base.
Yeah. And I do too, because I met most of them at your events.
Totally. And that's another thing too. So many people, like, our collective includes our founders, expert practitioners, creative technologists, and our investors. It's like one web, right? All of these things are connected, but it is not some abstract, separate, thing where we hide people from one another.
No.
Right?
We're all in the same room at least once a year.
Yeah, exactly. And next week.
Yeah. Next week.
It's gonna be great.
On that note, wrap it?
Yeah.
Okay.